And we are live on YouTube, on the Frugal Crafters YouTube channel. Hello, everybody. I'm here with Sarah.
Hi.
Let us know in the comments if you can hear us, if everything looks good. I've got a picture here of what we're going to paint, and we're going to use Inktense pencils, and I've got a list of the colors I used in the video description. Also, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsor, jerrysartorama.com. They have all the supplies that we're going to use today. Hold on one moment.
We're muted.
We're muted.
I forgot to check the muting.
We got some technical issues here.
Sorry, that's minor.
You can find all the supplies we're using today at jerrysartorama.com. They have the best prices on all of your art supplies, and they carry all the top brands as well as their own house brands, which can save you a ton of money. So do check them out before you shop anywhere else, and you'll be back because they'll have the best prices. So this photo is from paintmyphoto.com, and I have a link in the video description to it. So you can go check that out if you want to print that out and follow along, or you can just follow along with a demo here. And we're going to get right into it because it is going to take us about an hour to complete. And I'm starting off with kind of like a light pink Inktense pencil, and you can use watercolor pencils if you don't have the Inktense. I'm going to kind of talk about some of the different abilities of Inktense versus regular watercolor pencils so you can decide whether they're worth the investment. I like them quite a bit, and I'm happy to share what I know about them. I've been using them for a few years. I'm starting off with an oval on my paper, and that's going to be just slightly smaller than how big I want my my flower. That way I won't have any extraneous lines on the outside. And then I'm going to go in and put this as one petal on the bottom that's kind of hanging lower than the others. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in first. So I'm like putting a semicircle, and then I'm putting 3 bumps on it. So it's kind of like 3 lobes to that little peony petal. And then I'm going to do this one that's kind of further out. And if you're looking at the reference photo, you can follow right along there. And it wraps around there. You could sketch with a regular pencil if you want, and then go over your lines, but I'm pretty confident that that I can get it pretty good in the first go, so I'm just going to sketch it. So these petals will overlap, and I'm just sketching them in as I see them. So Inktense pencils have an advantage in the fact that once you have wet them, they become permanent, kind of like an India ink. So it makes glazing really easy, and we're going to do a lot of glazing today. Sometimes it's hard to draw and talk at the same time. Oh, please hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not already a subscriber, I'd love to have you as a subscriber. And share this live stream with your friends. Let us all benefit from each other's knowledge. If anybody has any questions on anything we're doing today, type them in all caps and Sarah will ask them to me. And if some questions get repeated, check the materials list in the video description for a list of everything we're using. And that color, if you are using Inktense, that color is Carmine Pink number 520. Again, it's in the list. I'm going to put a stem down here. This is felt. It's either felt green or fall green. My pencils are a little old, kind of worn off, but it's number 1530. I'm going to put a couple little leaves here. And if you have these flowers growing, you can always, pick some, and it's even better if you can look at the actual real thing rather than going from a photograph. So it's...
And peonies do smell great.
Oh, yeah. My mother has a couple bushes growing in her backyard. I've never planted them. I don't have a very good track record with flowers.
You're good at painting and drawing them.
Now for sharpening, when I sharpen my Inktense, because Inktense pencils, watercolor pencils, they all fall in a fairly similar price range. I think Jerry's has a set of 72 of these, which is a full line for about $100, and I think retail it's probably about $200. But so I like to conserve the pigment. So what I use is a knife, and I sharpen off the wood and keep the pigment. These are also available, excuse me, in stick form. So they're in like about 4-inch long, 1/4-inch wide sticks, and they have no wood on them. But I find the pencils to be much more useful personally. But you can get them in either form. But if you use either a comb pencil sharpener or a knife, you can just take the wood away and leave the lead, and that way you're not going to waste any, which I think is really good. Now I'm going to use a couple shades of pink here. I'm going to use Shiraz, which is kind of like a burnt carmine color. It's a very, very dark maroon. And I'm also going to use Fuchsia. And I'm going to go in and color, and we'll do one petal at a time. I'm going to go in and color about halfway up this petal here with the Fuchsia. Then I'm going to go in with the Shiraz, and I'm going to color in the bottom. Now I think in the regular Derwent watercolor pencils, there's a color called burnt carmine, which is very similar to this. And I recommend swatching out your colors whenever you get a new set of pencils, and keeping that nearby when you paint or when you're selecting your colors, so you know what you're getting. Now I'm taking some of that color I sketched in with, and I'm just overlapping that fuchsia color. Now I'm going to go in with a small brush. You can use like a number 6 or number 4, round or flat. I'm going to start up here and just kind of wet the top part of the petal without getting into where I just colored. So it's just getting the color on the edges and dragging that down. Now I can go in and liquefy this. These colors stain pretty quickly, so that's why I wanted to kind of wet that lighter portion of the petal first, so I wouldn't end up with a hard edge when I went to go into the color, so that way it can kind of wick up and blend. Don't get too much water on your brush. You'll want to wipe it off on the side of the water bucket, or just kind of dab it quickly on a paper towel while you're working, so you don't overdo it, because you don't want that to bleed out onto the background and then have a weird stain you can't lift. Now I'm taking my credit card scraper, and I'm going to scrape in some veining. This allows us to get a lot of the painting done in the first layer. We're going to go over with more glazes later, but this will give us a really nice base. And then if you decide you don't want to do any more on it later, you don't have to. So again, I'm going in with I find going in with the mid-tone to be the safest bet with this. So anywhere I see that fuchsia, I'm putting it in. And I'm putting it anywhere I see the shadow too, because I'd rather overlay the shadow and get a nice blend that looks natural. A little bit of the Shiraz in the shadow areas. So by putting the shadow here on this petal, it's going to make this frontal petal stand out a little bit more. And then just a little bit of that color I sketched with, just to make it look like the lines belong, the sketching lines.
Gracie Shack 1.
Yep.
Could you do a tutorial on shading? I lack the knowledge of shading.
I try to work it in every tutorial I do, so you can kind of build on everything as you go, so you kind of see it applied rather than just do a video on shading and not have it applied to anything. Might be a good idea for like an online course or something, because it's such a specific technique. But I work it in with my demos just so that you can see how it applies to this painting. There's a good book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain that might help you too.
Olisa Umanova, are you a professional artist?
I think so. I get paid to make art, so I guess so.
I say you are. People do buy, and people buy your art. Run Flash Run 14. Why aren't there any more jewelry tutorials?
I just posted one a couple days ago.
Oh. Serena Griffith. Do watercolors have an expiration date?
No, they're the probably one medium that you can keep for years and years and not really worry about them going bad, because they don't make a chemical reaction when they dry. So like when acrylics dry, they go through a chemical reaction. You can't wet them again and turn them back into paint, but watercolors you can. As long as you don't let them, get contaminated and get moldy, you'll be all right. We're going to skip over to this one, do the same thing. Actually, I could probably color in a few at once. And if you keep the lighter edge of the petal kind of at the top and the darker at the bottom, you'll naturally have those petals kind of separate from each other. And you'll get that depth. So that's where our shading is going, right? Where the petals overlap, because that's where the shadow would be cast.
E4 Eclectic. Hi ladies, could you please explain or demo foreshortening, especially with flower petals? Thanks so much.
Well, this one right here is kind of foreshortened. If you look at this petal would be just as long as that petal. And since you're seeing this kind of from the side reaching up, it appears to be longer than this because this is kind of coming out and towards us, so therefore it's shorter. The best way to learn foreshortening, I think, is to like maybe stand in front of your window and take a dry erase marker and draw what you see, or hold up a piece of plexiglass and just draw what you see. Hold it up somewhere, don't move, just keep your head in one spot and just draw what you see, because that way you will draw the foreshortened objects and you'll understand a little bit more of why certain things look the way they do. It's, you know, it's a distortion basically of how we're seeing things when we see something foreshortened. So I'm just doing the same process as before. I'm doing my shadows in the crease areas. I'm doing my fuchsia in the kind of body of the shadow, and then just to bridge the gap between the color and the lighter area of the petal, I'm using that Carmine Pink that that we sketched on with. Right, I'm just doing a few at once so that we can proceed a little faster.
Ian Jackson, do you use the Inktense outliner pencil? If so, what for?
You know, I honestly I don't use it. It's in my set, but I don't really use it. It's kind of it's like I believe more of like a waxier pencil, so that it won't disintegrate when you paint over it. Your lines will stay. So it depends. If you want that nice dark line, then go ahead and use it. But I kind of want my lines to disappear a little bit.
Little Shy Panda, Artist Loft tubed paints. Do they dry and go hard? Because I would like to make a palette instead of having them in the tubes.
They will, however, you'll probably want to mix a little bit of glycerin or honey into them, because they're going to crack and want to pop out, because they're student grade paint, and they will, that's one of the unfortunate things with student grade paint. They just don't have as much glycerin or binder in there to hold it together. So as long as you put like a little bit of honey or a little vegetable glycerin in there, and you can get that at any health food store or pharmacy, it'll work fine for you.
Magical Cat, do you use a blender with these pencils? Blenders confuse me somewhat. Love your live streams.
Thank you. You can use but if you do use this, don't use as much pencil. You can use like the Stampin' Up! Blender or the Tombow blender marker, any water-based blender marker, like blender pen. But you don't want to use as much because it will clog up the tip, and a little goes a long way. But that's excellent for like coloring with like rubber stamped images, and if you're working on cardstock, because the blender pens have a little bit of glycerin in them, and it makes the pen glide against cardstock, so you don't have to have watercolor paper, and you can still get a really nice result. You can also use a water brush. You just, instead of dipping your pen or your brush into the water like I'm doing, you can use a water brush and just have to squeeze a little bit as you go. Do keep a paper towel handy though with a water brush, because you are going to need to blot it. Now I just did what I told you guys not to do. I wet the color before I wet the top of the petal, because I wanted to demonstrate what not to do here.
What happens when you do that?
And you can see I don't have a nice blend there. I've got a very hard ridge. We can correct that when we get into the glazing portion of the tutorial, but there now you see why I told you to do that. And I can't wait too long with these pencils to dig in my my veining, or it just doesn't work very well. You got to kind of do it one at a time for the veining.
Aaron Kimmel, my 36 Inktense set doesn't have a very nice light pink. Do you have a recommendation? Fuchsia is the closest thing to pink I have in my set. Any tips to make do with the smaller set?
Oh yeah, you don't really need this Carmine Pink. The reason I'm using it is because that's what I sketched it in with, and I wanted to kind of bridge the gap. I don't want to just sketch it and then not use it again. You can totally do this without the Carmine Pink. And also, if you have any other watercolor pencils, they probably have a lighter pink because the Inktense range is just a much more vibrant set. So if you had just any other brand of watercolor pencils, your pink and that would be fine to mix and match. And it's not so strong that if you were doing glazes that it would make that much of an issue if it lifted up. That's the big thing about the Inktense is that once you've wet it and it's dry, it's not going anywhere, which is kind of cool. And I think the Albright drawers are the same. I have some, but I haven't used them enough to know if that's true or not.
Cindy Matthews, do the Inktense sticks and Prismacolor new pastels play well together?
Well, the new pastels are a hard chalk, and the Inktense sticks are like a water soluble crayon a little, but they're not very waxy. They're kind of like this. But they don't exactly feel like the pencils completely. Like the blocks of the sticks don't feel like they're exactly the same as the lead of the pencils. I find them to be a little chalkier. So actually they're similar enough that you probably don't need to have both of them. I would do the Inktense block first and then go over it with the new pastels, because I think if you tried to go over the new pastels, you would lift up all of that new pastel with your water. So do the sticks first and then do the pastels on top. But they should play fine together as long as you put them down in the right order.
Olga Mark Allen, gel sticks from Faber-Castell, bought last year on Amazon. Tried using. They are super dry and flaky. Any advice?
Oh, that's not good. Well, it sounds like they probably dried out. Like maybe they're just kind of old. I would try taking like a fine mist bottle and misting them with water and putting the caps on and just kind of setting them right side up in a jar for a day, and then go back to them and see if that's reconstituted them enough that you can use them. I've had that happen, and some people have told me they bought brand new ones and they like from the craft store of the gelatos, and they've done the same thing. So I just think it's how they're stored and maybe where they were shipped from.
Abby Ella, have you ever used St. Petersburg White Night watercolors?
I've used the Yarka St. Petersburg, which I've been told are the same thing, and they're really high quality. I really like them. I'm just filling in those petals just like we did before. All right, now we're going to wet them petal by petal and do the scraping just like we did before. And keep in mind where you're working, where you started, so that when we go back in to do glazing, you'll know where you should begin first. Again, we're going to start with the light part of the petal. Make sure it's wet before we go into blend into the colors so we have a soft blend.
Lie-by, best, cheapest source for watercolor card paper and envelopes.
If you are in the United States, Jerry's Artorama has a pack of 100 of the Strathmore watercolor cards. That's what I get to teach classes with. And they are, I believe, on sale for $30 for 100. So that brings you down to 30 cents a piece with envelopes. So I think that's a good deal. I sell my watercolor cards for $7 each when they're painted. So, you know, I don't have a lot of overhead in those. So that's kind of nice. And they're all ready to go. I don't have to make envelopes, which is a huge time saver for me when I'm packaging stuff up. And they do have the smaller quantities as well. And they have a good price on those. Just I get the 100 pack because it's the cheapest per card. And they also have some smaller packs of different sizes if you wanted some, like, you know, non-traditional watercolor card size, I haven't ordered any of those yet, but I might, because I think they would be kind of like a fun challenge to paint on a different size.
Gracie Shack 1, could you tell me please whether or not to buy the Inktense blocks, mainly cause for my art course I have to use a variety of mediums.
Honestly, Gracie, I would get, I know you have some of the Inktense pencils. I think you'd be better off to get to get more of the pencils. But if you do get the blocks, instead of buying a set, see if you can get some colors you don't already have. Because if you've got the set of 12 Inktense, and I think you told me once that you have those, Gracie, I might be misinformed. But if you get the same colors in the blocks as you have in the pencils, you're not gonna have as much versatility as if you buy different colors. So, you can still mix and match them. So that would be my advice. If you forgot one and you want to try the other, just buy them in different colors so you get a little more versatility. I think you'd have a little bit more versatility if you went with like a watercolor crayon, which I think you also told me you just purchased. So, I think watercolor crayons are a little bit a better, more versatile option than getting the pencils and the blocks of Inktense.
JPC13 Art, can you do some tutorials on watercolor bookmarks?
Oh, that'd be fun. I used to take all my like paintings that I thought were awful and I would cut them up into bookmarks and give them away at like art festivals.
Cynthia Mainwaring, what is your favorite medium?
Usually it's watercolor. So I go through little phases where I want to do printmaking or oils, but I always come back to watercolor. I like how it's always ready to go. You don't have to have a ton of supplies. You can just, grab your stuff and start painting.
Cheryl Sussman, are Derwent color pencils okay to start out with?
I love Derwent pencils. I have a lot of their different lines. They do water media really well. Like these are Derwent, these Inktense. I just purchased the set of 72 Color Soft because I've had smaller sets of those and I just really, really like them. They're not every artist's favorite though. I think my friend Lisa over at Lacquerie Fine Art does not like the Color Soft pencils because of the way she works. She wants a more like harder lead because she builds up so many layers. But I like those really soft, thick leads of the Color Soft, so it totally depends on your personal preference. I like it. I like the Derwent Graphitins. They're like graphite water-soluble pencils with a little bit of color. I like everything that I've tried of Derwent's, pretty much, except for their watercolor metallic pencils. Those are total junk. Don't buy those. But everything else, so that's the only thing I've tried of theirs that I wasn't absolutely in love with.
Yasna Yani, what do you use to prepare surface and what do you use to varnish?
For watercolor, I don't varnish. I did recently, and I haven't used it yet because I just bought it. I got some watercolor ground, Daniel Smith watercolor ground, and it's so you can do watercolor on like anything from like wood to tin to canvas, whatever you can imagine, pretty much. So I'm anxious to give that a try, and they recommend using a golden brand varnish on top of that. I think you probably want just something that's like not a water-based varnish, because water-based varnish is going to kick up and dissolve your watercolor. But you could probably even use clear spray paint from the hardware store for that matter, as long as it's, as long as it's clear and it's not water-based. There's that brush I had. So that's it. I frame under glass, or I mat it and put it in a clear bag for sale. I don't just leave my watercolors out in the elements. I think the only way to really protect a work on paper is to frame it behind glass. Otherwise, they're fragile. That's only one thing I don't like about watercolor. It's probably the most expensive to frame because you do need.
You have to do the good stuff.
Yeah, you need matte and glass basically, and with a canvas, you could put a wire on the back of a stretched canvas and hang it on the wall, and with a coat of varnish, and it's fairly versatile, fairly durable.
Ian Jackson, do you think the Inktense push as well as watercolor pencils?
I think so. I think they're very, well, you'll see when we do the background. I'll show you really quick here. When we do the background, we're going to do a wet into wet technique with the Inktense. So they flow. They're great. They're like an ink. And another drawback, though, I do want to let you know is they're light fast. They're not as light fast as like Albright Dürer pencils or like the Caran d'Ache watercolor pencils. So you do have that compromise there with these pencils. Like the Caran d'Ache Museum watercolor pencils are 4 times the price, 3 or 4 times the price. So you've got that to contend with, but yeah, you do have some light fastness issues because they're so vibrant and they're more of an ink than a paint. Now here I'm just going in and filling in my my petals, and I've got this felt green for my shadows. But if you're doing a card or you're working in an art journal, I don't think light fastness is as important. If you're doing a painting that you plan on selling for hundreds of dollars, yeah, you really want to make sure that's light fast. You don't want to send it home with somebody and have it fade. But then that also comes with the framing behind glass or plexiglass, so that's really going to help with the fading. It gives it a little bit of protection against the elements.
Olesa Urmanova. I have a lot of pastel pencils that I can't use because I don't know the right way to sharpen them. Any advice?
You should be able to sharpen them with a handheld sharpener, but you can also use a knife, just like I do with the Inktense, and just whittle away the wood carefully. As long as they haven't been dropped, they shouldn't shatter on you. That's the one thing with art pencils. You have to be careful with like pastel pencils or watercolor pencils that they don't get dropped, because they can shatter. And chalk pastel is fairly fragile, so you just have to be gentle and carefully get the wood away with like a sharp utility knife or craft knife.
JPC13 Art. Could you do a video on painting tiles to make coasters?
I have one on my channel, actually.
I thought you did.
Yep, just
I couldn't remember if I was imagining it or...
If you go to my channel, there's like if you click on my name, whenever you see my name, like in the comments or under the video, then that will take you to my channel, and then there's like a tiny little magnifying glass, kind of under the main player there, or maybe it might be at the top of your page, depending on where you're looking at it, if it's on mobile or if it's on a computer. Click that, and then a little search bar will open, and then just type in tile coasters or something like that, or whatever you're searching for, and it will bring up the video. And it's because otherwise, I mean, it's really hard to find anything, because there's over 1,300 videos on my channel. Or if you go to my blog it's easier to search my blog than it is to search a YouTube channel, I think.
Miku Hatsune. Any tips for beginners in oil painting? Just started using it.
Would just be carefully dispose of the rags that you're painting with, and crack a window if the solvents bother you, and clean your brushes after you're done with soap and water, just to make sure you get any residue off. But basically just have fun, explore the medium. I also like to use oil pastels to sketch on my design on my canvas before I get the paint to it, because it's a really great way to sketch on, and the oil pastel kind of turns to paint after you add the water to the paint to it. Now I'm just liquefying my leaves and stem. I almost feel like I could use a stiffer brush. If you're feeling like your pigment doesn't want to move, you can switch to like a stiffer nylon brush, and that will help. This is just a regular nylon Princeton cat's tongue. For the background, we're going to use the Mimics because we want a softer, thirstier brush, but Aqualons would be good for this too. Probably any of your small acrylic brushes would be just fine. They're a little stiffer than watercolor.
Lolly Molly 09. I have some water-soluble wax pastels, but they require so much water and work with a brush to get them to dissolve. Any suggestions?
It sounds like they're probably like a student grade, maybe. I think I would try maybe grading them, like maybe using go to the dollar store and just get like a little grater from the kitchen department that you're only going to use for art stuff, and just grate some of the material onto your paper and spray it and see what happens, and you might make a cool watercolor powder that way. Or you can use it really thickly, and then maybe just kind of wet your finger and smudge it like you would like an oil pastel. I know sometimes with like the supplies they make for children or student grade, the quality isn't very good, and it can be very frustrating to use, which is too bad, because when you got kids or beginners using products, you don't want them to be frustrated, because then they're going to abandon the art form. But try those two things. That might help. And it might also help if you have a hair dryer handy and you blast it with a hair dryer. That might warm up the wax enough to help it kind of break down.
Serena Griffith. Totally unrelated question, but have you read Pride and Prejudice? And if you have, did you enjoy it?
I have not. Have you, Sarah?
No.
I saw the movie. Isn't that the one with Colin?
Well, it depends. There's like 16 different versions of Pride and Prejudice.
That's the Mr. Darcy, right? That's the guy, right?
Is it?
That's the one?
I don't know. I can't keep.
And then there's Pride and Prejudice with zombies.
I haven't read that one either.
No, neither have I.
When I read, I don't know.
Entertainment?
I'm not.
That's awful. I heard they're very good books.
I guess.
Old-timey. I don't read much old-timey stuff.
I don't read old-timey stuff either. Sarah Perry, how should I prep a brush when using masking fluid to keep from ruining it?
Dip it in soap. And actually, I wouldn't use your best brush. And dip it in dish soap and then dip it in your masking fluid and it will protect it quite a bit. Now we're going to do our glazing layer. And we're pretty much just going to use fuchsia for this. Because that's our mid-range, but it's also our most vivid color, and it's the color I want to use the most. Now I'm doing this over my paper so you can see it. I don't recommend you doing this because you will get little speckles of the paint in your background. I've already got a few, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. And I don't have a ton of water on here, just enough to turn that into some paint. And you can see how I'm adding just like another veil of color on there, and it doesn't bother what's underneath because
Nice.
yeah, because these pencils are permanent now, so it's not bothering anything I have underneath.
Rodrigo Paez, question: Inktense can be used to do an underpaint for pastels?
Yes, absolutely. And Inktense can also be used on fabric. So if you're a quilter,
Oh, that's right.
yeah, if you're a quilter and you want to do some like interesting stuff with fabric, these are great for that. And something I've done with these is I had just a little canvas apron that I would wear at craft fairs to hold my money, and I stamped on it, and then I colored it with the Inktense, and then I sprayed it with water, and I used some water and fabric medium with a brush and applied it over it just for a little extra protection, and it held up really well. So it's really fun. You can do a lot with that.
Sandy Parker, hi, I'm covering a recipe box with paper and wonder what you would recommend to seal it with. Hate the lines Mod Podge leaves. Thank you. Or thanks.
Let's see, what about, like after you've got everything glued down, you could try Minwax Polycrylic, and you can get that in gloss or satin, and it's self-leveling. So as long as you're on a hard substrate, it should be fine. Like a wooden box, it should be absolutely fine for that. I don't know about canvas. It might be too hard of a sealer for canvas. You could also use like an acrylic floor wax.
Envirotech, which makes the polyurethane,
Oh,
they make a spray.
Really?
They do. They make a spray finish. I don't know how it would be on a recipe box with paper, but they do make a spray finish. I've used on just plain painted wood and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's held up great.
So is that a resin like their Envirotechs?
I think it's similar to a resin, but you don't have to mix or pour anything. It's just in a can.
Interesting.
Because I like the Envirotech when I'm doing, for a nice finish on a tray or a box, something like that.
I would recommend sealing whatever you're doing under the Envirotechs, though, with like a water-based sealer, just because with resin, if it is like a resin like that, it can seep through and make your paper transparent.
It didn't when I used it.
You probably glued it, though. You probably had some Mod Podge or something in there to seal it.
Cancel that. Forget I said anything.
But no, that's probably a good idea on top of something you've probably already applied glue over,
The only thing with the Envirotech stuff is when you use it, you have to do it outside. You cannot do it in your house. That stuff is toxic, which is why it works so well.
Yeah. The smell lets you know it's working.
Woo! That lightheaded feeling, it means it's doing its job.
Yeah.
Sammy Brown, this might sound like a dumb question. Is Lindsay using watercolor pencils, and how are Inktense different if they are?
You could use watercolor pencils. These are a water-soluble ink. So for all intents and purposes, they're like a watercolor pencils, but technically it's ink rather than watercolor pigment, so it's permanent once it dries. But if you have watercolor pencils and you want to do this, you go right ahead. Just be very gentle. Like when you go over to do your glazes like we're doing here, just make sure that you're not like scrubbing the paper underneath. Use a soft brush. And just gently put that layer of color and then leave it. Because if you wiggle your brush around too much and you got watercolor underneath, you're going to lift it. And you might end up with some weird hard lines or blooms and patchiness.
Patchy.
Yeah. But I mean, I've done it with watercolor pencils too, and it's pretty. So don't let your, don't let what you have for supplies, make you not try this. I mean, heck, use paint. If you have watercolor paint and that's what you got, use your paint. Do glazes that way. Just be very gentle as you put your subsequent layers on.
Callie Garrett, Lindsay, please do a Crayola colored pencil challenge or video.
I don't think I have any Crayola.
I was gonna say, I don't think you have any Crayola.
I feel like I'm a little old to do those challenges. It seems like it's always like I don't know, teenagers
seems like
doing
a lot
those.
Of work and effort for when you could be painting a beautiful picture of a peony.
Although, I mean, there's nothing wrong with using Crayolas if that's what you got. Absolutely. Definitely
I
use
have
them.
some Crayolas mixed in with my Prismacolors that I have at home when I'm doing just colored pencil on a card, stamped image.
Yep, absolutely. Prangs are good too for a student quality.
I do have some prangs. I have like a glass thing that's just full of an assortment of colored pencils.
Yeah. Yeah, for student grade, for like kids grade, I would say prangs are the way to go. They just their prang watercolors are decent too. If you're looking to if you're looking to save some money and get some decent quality stuff, yeah, I think prang is the way to go. Mm-hmm. And I think it's probably the same price as Crayola. It might even be cheaper. I have no idea.
I don't know.
My kids use my stuff now, so we're long out of the Crayola. Crayola ain't making them happy anymore.
They're quickly learning. There's a lot better stuff. Olga Mark Allen. Question, Lyra watercolor crayons, good purchase for the money, or is there something better?
They're a great value. Personally, I prefer the quality of Caran d'Ache, but you can't beat the price of the Lyra, and for the money, they're a way better deal they're a way better value, I think, than Caran d'Ache. Caran d'Ache have gotten really expensive lately too. I remember when I got my set of 84, and I remember just like stalking websites until I found the price until it come down. I mean, this was like, oh my gosh, probably 13, 14, 15 years ago. And when I saw the price go down to like $64, I grabbed like the set of 84. I jumped on it. And yeah, they're great, but yeah, they're so expensive. The Lyras are very nice. They don't have as much of a color range, but you can get the Caran d'Ache open stock. So if you get a set of Lyras, you can buy, what you feel like you're missing with a Caran d'Ache and really get a good assortment. And I used Lyras on my Craftsy class for most of that. Mm-hmm. And part of that was because there's no way I'm shipping my Caran d'Ache should not leave the house, I'll tell you that right now.
They're hidden in a secret spot that nobody knows about.
Yeah, they're my stay-at-home crayons.
Mm-hmm. Rovina Litau, when you mix ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, you get a dark blue, but I got a green color. How?
Ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. It must be that your burnt sienna has yellow undertones, and maybe your ultramarine has more is greener, but because your ultramarine should be purple base, and your burnt sienna is red base, and they usually are almost like mixing blue and orange together. I would just say whatever your colors are, they're just a little bit off. So add a little bit of red, a little cad red to that, and that should bring it back. That should neutralize your green because they're opposites. All right, now we're going to go into our background. And you can, spend more time on the petals if you want to. So for the background, I'm actually going to switch to a bigger brush for wetting my paper. And you're going to have to do this in sections because we are not working from like a big pan of watercolors. We're working from our pencils. And if you want to switch to your watercolors, go right ahead. But I'm going to wet an area here. Actually, I'm going to avoid those petals that I just did. I'm turning my work because I want to, oh, I got a hair on there. I want to be able to comfortably reach the areas that I'm working on. So I'm going to wet beyond where I'm going to add paint just so I don't end up with any hard lines. And I'm not going right up to the flower just because with this big brush I might get on the petals, and I don't want that to happen because I don't want my background color. I don't know why I have so much fur. I think the cats have been up on my table because I've got like all this. Like the cat's been up rubbing its face against my brushes or something.
Let's see. Ian Jackson, have you ever made your own watermark emboss?
Yeah, I use glycerin. It works really well. So I'm going to start off with some blue, and this is This is Iris Blue, and you can actually use this blue if you want to glaze on some more shadows on the leaves, which I might do in a little bit. And I'm just picking up the pigment from the stick and dabbing it in the wet background and letting it flow. I'm going to do that with a little bit of the, you can use either yellow. I think I want this kind of earthier yellow. It's a mustard. I used a little of that in the stem.
Cheryl Sussman, what kind of varnish do you use on a watercolor pencil drawing?
I personally don't varnish them, but if you do want to varnish them, I would go with probably something that is oil-based, so that it won't disturb what you've already done. Although you could probably go over Inktense with a water-based varnish because it shouldn't lift.
Rovina, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Just pick up a
ahead.
little green.
We've got lots of questions.
Oh yeah, go right ahead. Fire away.
Here.
We're going to keep repeating this process all the way around the picture.
Rovina Latau, is there any other method where you can get your marker ink back? I'm assuming she's got some dried out markers.
Okay, if you have dried like alcohol markers, because this happens sometimes, you'll buy some and they've been in the store for a long time, or maybe you find a great deal online. Oops, I'm sludging my water bucket. Or maybe you found like a really good deal online, but when they get to you, like half of them are dried out, and that's happened to me before with the old style Spectrum Noir markers. And what I did was I got some denatured alcohol from the hardware store, and it's called denatured alcohol in the United States. It might be called ethanol, or it might be called mentholated spirits, might be what it's called in the UK. I'm not sure. I know you guys have different names for it. But basically, denatured alcohol is ethanol with, it's got some additives in it so people don't drink it, basically. I know. I don't want to go to a bigger brush here. And then I just used an eyedropper or a little pipette, and I pulled out the chisel nib, and I just dripped in some of that and let it sit horizontally, and then in a couple of hours, it was just fine. So that's what I recommend doing. If your marker's gone dry, if it's like a Copic or a Spectrum Noir or a Tria, you can buy the reinkers for it. And that's probably what I'd recommend. But if it's something that doesn't have reinkers, then I would just use like alcohol ink, like Tim Holtz alcohol ink. Just know that if you've used like Tim Holtz alcohol ink on your marker, don't apply it, don't use it with like as part of an airbrush system, because it may have, or it does have like a resin in there. And actually anything that I've put denatured alcohol in, I wouldn't use in an airbrush system because of the poison that they add to it, so people don't drink it. If you're using pure ethanol, which is what I believe the Copic blending solution is, you should be fine for doing any sort of airbrushing.
Hello, Cinnamon. I'm a little behind. Cinnamon's joined us today.
Cinnamon! How's Cinnamon today?
She's good. She's impressed with how fast you are.
I practiced. I painted this earlier today to make sure I've been so behind. I like to get these done like a day before, but the last few weeks I've been painting these the day of, the morning of, like done 10 minutes before I put it on Facebook.
Sandy Dawkins, I'm getting ready and not able to watch chat, so sorry if this is redundant. I want to be clear. Did Lindsay say you can paint over oil pastels? What sort of paint? Acrylics, oils?
Oil paints.
Oils.
Yep, I use oil pastels as a under-sketching medium for my oil paintings all the time. In fact, before I had oil paints when I was a kid, you'd always get those sets of like art supplies that had oil pastels as part of them, and then I would use those with some like paint thinner, and I would turn them into oil paint and be able to oil paint before I actually had oils, which was really cool.
Ian Jackson, Lindsay, have you done any Derwent art bars? I don't. What is
a
Derwent art bar?
I've never used those. I think they're a watercolor crayon. I think it's kind of like their version of a watercolor crayon, but I haven't used them. They've hopped into my online shopping baskets before, but I've never pulled the trigger on them. If anybody's used them, please let me know what you think.
Audrea Gustafson loves them.
Oh, cool. Are they, Audra, is that her name?
Yes.
Are they,
I'm sorry, Audrea.
I'm sure she forgives you. Are they like waxy like a crayon, or and creamy like a Caran d'Ache crayon? I'm just wondering.
Mm-hmm.
Or are they more chalkier like a, or drier like a pencil?
Let's see. Emma Shaw. Great tip about masking fluid. I'm new to using it. How do you get a large area to cover to avoid paint going under?
Well, I'm not a big masking fluid fan, so if I'm going to use it, it's probably just going to be to mask off a small area. I think I would use frisket film, which is something that airbrush artists use, and it's like a big sticker basically, or it's like contact paper kind of, and then you would cut it out the size you want and you press it to your paper. Now, obviously, you'd be able to see where it was, so you wouldn't have to paint over that area that much, but then you would peel it off when your paper's all dry, and you would have that nice preserved area. And it might be cheaper, too. It'd certainly be easier to deal with.
Little Shy Panda, can you do an acrylic paint tutorial? I just bought some and painted on a canvas, but I would like to know more methods for beginners. Well, Little Shy Panda, the Art Sherpa, aka Cinnamon Cooney, who's here in the chat, does fabulous acrylic paint tutorials, and she has them for beginners, for mediums, for expert, and everything in between. So check her out.
Yes, definitely check out the Art Sherpa. I'm not a big acrylic painter. It's not my bae. Is that what the kids would say?
I have no idea. I'm at that age where I'm like, what? What does that mean? Like, I was at someone's house yesterday, and their daughter had the E! Entertainment or whatever talking about some people, and I was like, I don't even know who these people are. Why are they on what? I'm like, oh no. Let's see.
I'm taking a little bit of that blue, and I'm adding it to the leaves, because I realized I haven't used it anywhere except the background, so I want to make sure that I have it somewhere else in the painting. And then we're going to be wrapping it up with this one. Went quicker than I thought. I thought this was going to take longer. I don't know what time. Oh, it's only 1:17. Wow, it's only 45 minutes. We are just cooking with fire today.
Serena Griffith, let's say I use too much water on my paper. Can you pick up water from the paper without picking up the colors and ruining the painting?
Yes, you can. The best way to do that is to take a nice, either a natural hairbrush or one of these synthetics that mimic natural hair. Dry it off on your paper towel so you get as much water out as you can, like that, and then lay that down in the puddle and let it soak up the extra water, and that will take up more water and leave the pigment behind, rather than like dabbing it with a paper towel, which would just kind of pull up everything. So that's what I do when I get too much, and that does happen quite a bit. You're in good company there.
You get painting and you just get excited.
Yep. Get out of control.
Watercolor everywhere. Haley Q, are there any instances where Lindsay prefers to use watercolor pencils rather than paints for technique? Or is it just I just want to use these today kind of thing?
Size is a big determinator. Determinator?
It's a word. It works.
Because like if I'm doing a rubber stamped image, or I'm working on like a really small card, or something where I really want to confine myself into a smaller area, pencils are much more convenient. Or it could just be that I'm traveling and I don't want to deal with a bucket of water. I'll rather just take my watercolor pencils and a water brush. So it's more of like a convenience thing, or how big I'm working. And sometimes, it's very, it's not messy. It's a lot, you can confine yourself a little bit more. You could sit and have your supplies on the coffee table and be, using watercolor pencils. I also think it's part of the reason is because you don't have to do it in one go. So if you want to just color an image with your pencils and then go in and add your water later, you can do it in stages. Whereas like once you start a watercolor painting, sometimes you have to kind of finish it then, or you're going to lose your blendability and your spontaneity, whereas you can plan a little bit more with the pencils, I think. So it's personality wise, like what I'm in the mood for, and it's also like what I'm painting and how large I'm painting. And I'm just going a little this lighter apple green to kind of bridge the gap between the lighter and the darker colors on my leaves and stems. And that's gonna do it. So if we have any more questions before we sign off today,
I'm way behind.
Okay, type them in caps.
I'm trying to find where
you left off.
Yes, because there's only so much space.
That's all right. If we don't get to them, you can leave them in the comments, and I will make sure to check back in a little while and make sure that I answer anybody's question that they leave in the comments.
I think someone asked if I was going to bring the glass paint watercolor. Horrible. I should bring it in to show people just how bad it is.
I'm wondering if I should spatter this. I haven't spattered on this one yet. I could spatter
you
this
could mix it up and not spatter this week.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I did forget. I forgot to put a little bit of green on the front peony leaves. We'll do that right now, too. So you can hunt down a few more questions.
Okay. Let's see. Sarah, JPC13 Art, are you going to ever bring your glass bottle painting to show us? I actually do have it. I didn't throw it out.
You have it with you?
I don't have it with me today, but I have it at the house.
Oh, yes, definitely.
I should bring it in. It's embarrassing.
We'll show and tell.
This is what happens when you first start out. Let's see. Janine Elise Pike, can you explain the glazing again? I don't understand.
Glazing is putting a transparent layer over another layer. So when we went around the first time, we kind of put down the base colors and we used our credit card scraper to dig in some veins. Then when we went around the second time, we put on another more layers of shadows. We could adjust colors. I'll show you. We can even do we can even do some details here. So if I want to do a little more veining, I had a bead of water on there. I was blotting the dreaded bead. So I can go in, I can add details like that just in transparent washes, so that everything that I've done so far is still visible under there. I'm just building up another layer. Okay, so that's all glazing is. It's just putting on a layer over a layer that you're still seeing, rather than if let's say you're painting a typical acrylic painting and you'd paint something and then you'd paint something on top of it. You wouldn't necessarily want to see what is underneath. Here, when you're doing a glaze, you're doing it on purpose so that you can see what's underneath. Like with acrylics, they sell a glazing medium so that you can get that same look. But basically, it's just thin veils of color. If that makes sense. If you glaze your walls, you paint your walls maybe green, and then you might glaze over a yellow ochre color or something and sponge some of that off so you can still see the green through it. That's what glazing is. It's just kind of adding an adjustment layer or adding a little more transparent detail on top that you can see through. Okay, let's see.
Ian Jackson, do you use pen and wash with these pencils?
Oh, you totally can. Oh, something else I wanted to mention here. My paper is rectangular, but I probably would prefer to have it more of a square. And what I would do for framing this would be, and I'll take this dry one here, which is my first version here. What I would do to frame this is I would mount this onto a piece of avocado green mat board, and then I would cut a mat around it so I'd have this cool decal edge. And what I do to do that is I just put down a ruler and I tear off the excess paper. So then I would have this kind of cool deckled edge around all four sides. And even though I didn't really plan it to be like that, it looks like it was meant, it was handmade paper, and that's the size it was. So that's something I kind of like to do when I'm framing. I might tear a little bit off from the top, but I would put that onto some green card or green board, and then I would cut a mat, a white mat around it, so I'd have that little bit of reveal, and you would see those pretty edges. And there's just a little framing tip for you if you have a piece of paper like this and you don't have your background going all the way to the edge, and you like that little kind of rough border there. Did that answer his question? My gosh, or did I just completely go on a different tangent?
No, I think you did. All right, let's see.
I could tear a little bit of that off.
Dominique Fecteau found a ton of fiddleheads in her yard.
Awesome.
Ugh, yucky.
You don't like fiddleheads?
No, they're.
Oh my gosh.
Well, it's been several years since I've tried them, so perhaps I do like them. And we're all caught up on questions.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Please check out our sponsor, jerrysartorama.com, for all the supplies I used. There are links in the video description, and you can find everything you need there. So don't be shy. Shop around. Go there last, and then see how much money you could save by ordering from Jerry's instead of all the other places.
What, there are other places?
None that you really need to worry about. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you leave and let your friends know about these Friday 12:30 live streams so we can have even more folks next week. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy crafting.